Do you remember being 7 years old, sitting by a window on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday afternoon and feeling sad? Not because anything bad happened, not because you were hurt or lonely or scared, just sad. A deep, inexplicable sadness that felt bigger than your small body could contain. Maybe you felt like you didn't quite belong on this earth, like you were living in someone else's body, wearing someone else's life. Maybe you tried to explain it to your parents. I feel sad, but I don't know why. And maybe they said what parents say. What's wrong, sweetie? Did something happen at school? And you couldn't find the words because nothing was wrong. Yet everything felt heavy with a kind of beautiful sorrow you had no language for. And maybe, just maybe, you still feel this way sometimes. Even now, as an adult. But now you've learned to hide it better, haven't you? Because how do you explain to your coworkers, your friends, your partner, that sometimes you just feel heartbroken by the sheer weight of being alive? How do you tell them that sometimes happiness feels foreign in your body, like wearing clothes that don't quite fit? Maybe you're listening to this right now thinking, finally, someone gets it. Well, someone did get it. A man named Carl Jung spent his entire life studying people like us. You know what Jung observed? That some psyches are oriented inward from the start, introversion, and led by deep feeling or intuition, which can make life feel solemn and meaningful early on. If you've felt this nameless sadness since childhood, if you've always felt like you're living slightly out of step with the world around you, you're not broken. This lifelong, beautiful sadness often reflects a Jungian temperament, not a flaw. If sadness disables sleep, appetite, work, or safety, it's wise to seek clinical support alongside this inner work. You're someone whose heart was born already knowing about loss, about beauty, about the bittersweet nature of existence. While other kids were purely happy playing with toys, you were the one who felt moved to tears by sunsets. While others saw a dead bird and stepped over it, you held funerals, understanding instinctively that something sacred had been lost. You probably thought you were weird. You probably still do. Maybe you still scan rooms when you enter them, immediately picking up on who's pretending to be okay, who's carrying invisible weight, who's smiling but dying inside. Maybe you still find yourself tearing up at commercials that don't affect anyone else, or feeling overwhelmed in grocery stores by all the human stories surrounding you. The elderly man buying dinner for one, the young mother juggling 3 kids in a tight budget, the teenager working after school to help their family. You've probably learned to make jokes about being too emotional or overly dramatic. You've developed a whole repertoire of deflections. Sorry, I'm just tired, or I don't know why I'm crying, ignore me, or I'm fine, really. These little phrases that protect others from the intensity of what you actually feel. But here's what Jung understood. You weren't weird. You were awake. Awake to dimensions of feeling that most people spend their entire lives unconscious of. Your childhood sadness wasn't a problem to be solved. It was a gift to be understood. Your parents probably worried about you. Teachers might have called you overly sensitive or suggested you needed to toughen up. Other kids might have found you too intense, too much. And so you learned to perform happiness, didn't you? You learned to smile when you were expected to smile, to laugh when others laughed, to hide the depth of what you actually felt. And that performance, God, how exhausting it became. Jung called people like us feeling types. but not in the way most people think about feelings. He meant that we experience the world primarily through our emotional evaluation system. We don't just see a sunset. We feel its beauty so intensely it almost hurts. We don't just meet a person. We sense their hidden sadness, their unspoken fears, the loneliness they carry like a secret. This isn't just sensitivity. This is a completely different way of being in the world. You know how sometimes you'll be in a crowded room and suddenly feel overwhelmed by everyone's unspoken emotions? How you can sense the sadness behind someone's smile, the fear behind their anger, the desperation behind their success. That's not your imagination. That's not you being too much. That's your nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do. Feel deeply, perceive accurately, register the emotional truth of situations that others miss entirely. Maybe you've noticed that you can't watch certain movies because they stay with you for days. That you avoid the news sometimes because it feels like the world's pain is pouring directly into your bloodstream. That you need recovery time after social events, not because you're antisocial, but because you've been unconsciously processing everyone else's emotional state along with your own. You might be the person who remembers not just what people said, but how they felt when they said it. Who notices when someone's energy shifts, when their smile doesn't quite reach their eyes, when they're trying just a little too hard to seem okay. This isn't nosiness or overanalysis. It's a form of emotional intelligence so sophisticated that most people don't even recognize it exists. But living with this gift, because it is a gift, even when it doesn't feel like one, is like having perfect pitch in a world full of tone-deaf people. You hear harmonies they can't, dissonance they ignore, beauty they overlook. And sometimes the intensity of what you perceive is almost unbearable. Let me ask you something, and be honest with yourself. How many times have you been told you're too sensitive? How many times have people suggested you just think positive or don't take things so personally? How many times have you wondered what's wrong with you that you can't just be happy like everyone else seems to be? Here's the truth Jung discovered. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You're not defective. You're not too much. You're exactly as sensitive as you're meant to be. The problem isn't your depth. It's a culture that has forgotten how to value it. We live in a world that worships surface-level happiness, that treats depth like a disease to be cured. We're told that feeling sad without a good reason is pathological, that being moved to tears by beauty is excessive, that carrying the weight of the world's pain is neurotic. But Jung understood something different. He saw that melancholy isn't the absence of joy. It's the presence of profound awareness. It's what happens when a soul is naturally attuned to the full spectrum of human experience, not just the bright, shiny parts our culture wants to focus on. Your sadness isn't random. It's not meaningless. It's your soul's response to living in a world where so much beauty goes unnoticed, so much pain goes unwitnessed, so much depth goes unexplored. You feel sad because you see clearly. You feel melancholic because you love deeply. You feel like you don't belong because you're homesick for a world that doesn't exist yet. A world where sensitivity is valued, where depth is celebrated, where people like you don't have to hide who they are. I want you to think about the people in your life who seek you out when they're in pain. Because there are some, aren't there? People who come to you when their world is falling apart, who call you at 2 a.m. when they can't sleep, who somehow know you'll understand their heartbreak in a way others won't. Maybe it's the friend who texts you when they're having a panic attack because they know you won't tell them to just calm down. Maybe it's the coworker who finds excuses to stop by your office when they're struggling at home because something about your presence feels safe. Maybe it's family members who save their deepest confessions for you, who trust you with secrets they've never told anyone else. They don't come to you because you have easy answers. They come to you because you can sit with them in the darkness without trying to immediately drag them into the light. They come to you because your own experience with sadness has taught you how to be present with pain, theirs and your own. You've probably noticed that you're often the one people remember during their worst moments. Not the cheerful friend who's always optimistic, not the successful one with all the advice, but you, the one who feels deeply, who doesn't rush to fix things, who can hold space for whatever they're experiencing without judgment. This is what Jung called being a wounded healer. Your wounds, your sensitivity, your melancholy, your too deep feelings become the very source of your ability to help others heal. Not by fixing them, not by making their pain go away, but by showing them they're not alone in it. But here's where it gets complicated. Because sometimes, be honest with yourself here. Sometimes your sadness becomes a place to hide. Sometimes your melancholy becomes a beautiful prison that keeps you separate from a world that feels too harsh, too shallow, too disappointing. There's a difference between sadness that connects you to life and sadness that protects you from it. There's a difference between depth that serves love and depth that serves only itself. Jung knew this. He worked with many people who used their sensitivity as a reason to avoid the messy, imperfect work of actually living, who turned their beautiful sadness into spiritual pride, who hoarded their deep feelings like treasures rather than transforming them into gifts for others. The question isn't whether you should stop feeling deeply. You can't, and you shouldn't try. The question is, what are you doing with all that feeling? Are you letting it connect you more deeply to others? Or are you using it to stay safe and separate? Your melancholy carries information. It's trying to tell you something about what matters, about what you value, about what you're here to protect and preserve in this world. But you have to listen to it consciously, work with it intentionally, rather than just being overwhelmed by it. When you feel sad for no apparent reason, instead of fighting it or judging it, try asking it, what are you trying to show me? What do you want me to understand? Because your sadness isn't your enemy, it's a messenger, carrying news from the deepest parts of yourself about what you care about most. Maybe you feel sad when you see people living unconsciously because you value awareness. Maybe you feel melancholic when you witness beauty because you understand how precious and fragile it is. Maybe you feel heartbroken by others' pain because you have the capacity for profound empathy. Sometimes your sadness might be grieving for your younger self, the child who had to hide their sensitivity, who learned to apologize for their depth, who was told they were too much when they were actually exactly enough. Sometimes it's mourning for all the connections that could have been deeper, all the conversations that stayed on the surface when they could have been profound. All the times you've had to pretend to be someone you're not. And sometimes, this might surprise you, your sadness is actually a form of love. Love for this broken, beautiful world. Love for the people around you who are struggling in silence. Love for the parts of life that are so precious they make your heart ache just thinking about them. These aren't character flaws. These are profound spiritual and emotional capacities that this world desperately needs. Jung wrote in his collected works, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." For people like us, our myth often involves being guardians of depth, keepers of feeling, witnesses to beauty and pain that others might miss. You're not just someone who happens to feel sad sometimes. You're someone whose nervous system is calibrated to register what others can't, whose heart is large enough to hold what others won't, whose soul is brave enough to feel what others fear. But this calling, because that's what it is, a calling, comes with tremendous responsibility. You can't just feel deeply for its own sake. You have to transform that feeling into something that serves life, that serves love, that serves healing. This might mean creating art that helps others feel less alone. It might mean being the friend who really listens when someone is struggling. It might mean working in fields that require genuine compassion, therapy, teaching, healing, advocacy. Or it might mean something entirely unique to you, some way of expressing your depth that only you can offer. I know how overwhelming it can be to feel this much, to care this deeply, to carry so much awareness of pain and beauty simultaneously. There are days when you probably wish you could just turn it off, when you envy people who seem to glide through life without feeling everything so intensely. Maybe you've tried to numb it with work, with substances, with endless distractions, with relationships that keep you too busy to feel. Maybe you've gone through periods where you've tried to become someone else entirely, someone lighter, someone who doesn't cry at commercials or feel devastated by world events or carry the weight of other people's unexpressed emotions. But it never works for long, does it? Because your depth isn't something you can turn off without turning off the most beautiful parts of yourself too. Your capacity for sorrow is intimately connected to your capacity for love, for awe, for profound appreciation of life's fleeting moments. Here's what Jung would want you to know. The world needs your tears. It needs your sensitivity. It needs people who feel the full weight of what it means to be human, who can't just ignore suffering, who can't pretend everything is fine when it's not. In our culture of spiritual bypassing and toxic positivity, you're a living reminder that depth matters, that feeling matters, that some things are worth grieving. You're part of what keeps human consciousness honest, what prevents us from floating away into purely superficial concerns. This doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your own happiness. It means learning to see your melancholy as sacred, your sensitivity as necessary, your depth as a form of service. And here's something beautiful Jung discovered. When people learn to embrace their depth rather than fight it, when they stop apologizing for their sensitivity and start honoring it, something magical happens. They become more genuinely joyful than they've ever been. Not the shallow, performance joy they learned to fake, but a deep-rooted joy that can coexist with sadness, that's actually enhanced by their capacity for feeling. Your joy, when you find it, will be richer than most people's because it's been tempered by your understanding of sorrow. Your love, when you express it, will be more profound because you know how precious and fragile connection really is. Your compassion will be real because it's been earned through your own experience with pain. But first, you have to stop hiding. You have to stop pretending to be someone you're not. Stop performing happiness you don't feel. Stop apologizing for the depth of your emotional experience. This is terrifying, I know. Because what if people can't handle the real you? What if your depth makes them uncomfortable? What if they prefer the shallow version you've been presenting? Here's what Jung learned. The right people, the people who are meant to be in your life, will be drawn to your authenticity like flowers to sunlight. Yes, you might lose some relationships that were based on the false self you've been performing. But you'll gain something infinitely more valuable. Connections based on who you really are. And you'll discover something else. You're not as alone as you thought. There are others like you, other deep feelers, other sensitive souls who have been hiding their true nature, waiting for permission to be real. When you stop hiding your depth, you give them permission to stop hiding theirs. The melancholy you've carried since childhood isn't a burden to be healed. It's a bridge to be built. A bridge between the shallow world most people inhabit and the deep waters where real transformation happens. A bridge between unconscious living and awakened feeling. A bridge between isolation and genuine connection. Your sadness has been teaching you something your whole life. How to feel deeply without being destroyed by feeling. How to love fully despite the risk of loss. How to remain open even when openness brings pain. These are advanced emotional skills that most people never develop. You've been in training your entire life for something the world desperately needs. Think about the moments in your life when your melancholy has been most present. I bet if you look closely, these are also the moments when you've felt most alive, most real, most connected to something greater than yourself. Your sadness and your aliveness aren't opposites, they're dance partners. This is why you can feel heartbroken and grateful simultaneously, why beauty moves you to tears, why love and loss feel inseparable in your body. You're not confused about your emotions, you're experiencing them at their full depth, in all their complexity. Most people experience emotions one at a time, in simple, manageable doses. You experience them symphonically, in full orchestral complexity. This can be overwhelming, but it's also what makes your inner life so rich, so nuanced, so ultimately meaningful. Jung spent his life learning to trust this complexity, to see it not as chaos, but as a more complete way of being human. He learned that people like us aren't meant to choose between joy and sorrow, between hope and grief, between love and loss. We're meant to hold it all, to be spacious enough for the full human experience. And when we learn to do this consciously, when we stop fighting our depth and start celebrating it, we become something precious and rare. Fully awake human beings. People who can hold others in their pain without trying to fix it, who can witness beauty without needing to possess it, who can love deeply without guarantees of safety. The world is full of people living half-awake lives, skimming along the surface of their own experience. But not you. You dive deep. You feel fully. You live with an intensity that most people can barely imagine. Yes, this means you suffer more than they do. But it also means you love more, you appreciate more, you understand more. Your tears water gardens of compassion that others can't even see. Your heartbreak opens spaces in your chest that become homes for others' pain. As we come to the end of our time together, I want you to know something. That 7-year-old sitting by the window, feeling inexplicably sad on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, wasn't broken. They were awake. awake to the beauty and sorrow of existence in a way that most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid. Your melancholy isn't a mistake. It isn't a disorder to be cured or a problem to be solved. It's a profound emotional and spiritual capacity that, when embraced rather than hidden, becomes one of your greatest gifts to a world that desperately needs more feeling, more depth, more authentic connection to what really matters. You don't have to hide anymore. You don't have to pretend to be shallower than you are, happier than you feel, or simpler than your soul knows itself to be. You have permission to be exactly as deep, as sensitive, as beautifully melancholic as you actually are. The right people will not only accept this about you, they'll treasure it. They'll come to you when they need to remember what it feels like to be fully human. They'll seek you out when they need permission to feel deeply themselves. Your sensitivity is not your weakness, it's your superpower. Your melancholy is not your burden, it's your calling. Your depth is not your problem, it's your gift to a world that has forgotten how to feel. Stop hiding that beautiful melancholic soul of yours. It's rarer and more valuable than you know. And maybe, just maybe, learning to see your sadness as sacred is exactly what the world has been waiting for. Take care of yourself, deep feeler. Honor your sensitivity. Trust your melancholy. Let your tears water the world. You're exactly who you're supposed to be.